The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Kensington Palace as Prince Harry stood at his office window, watching the groundskeepers tend to the roses his mother had once loved. His reflection in the glass showed a man caught between two worlds, the one he was born into and the one he was choosing to create. The weight of the decision he and Meghan had made pressed heavily on his shoulders as he prepared for what would be their final official engagement as senior members of the royal family. Meghan entered the room quietly, her presence immediately filling the space with the calm strength that had first drawn him to her. She carried 2 cups of tea, a ritual they had maintained even through the most turbulent times. Her dark hair was pulled back elegantly, and she wore a simple navy dress that would be appropriate for the Commonwealth Day service they were about to attend. But there was something in her eyes, a mixture of sadness and relief that spoke to the complexity of their situation. "The car will be here in 20 minutes, she said softly, handing him a steaming cup. Their fingers touched briefly, and he felt the same electric connection that had sparked between them on their first blind date years earlier. Despite everything they had endured, the media scrutiny, the family tensions, the impossible balancing act between duty and personal happiness, their bond remained unshakable. Harry took a sip of his tea and turned to face her fully. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, though they both knew the question carried layers of meaning beyond just the day's events. Were they ready to face the cameras one last time as working royals? Were they ready to see his family, knowing that relationships had been strained to the breaking point? Were they ready to close this chapter of their lives and step into an uncertain future? Meghan moved closer and adjusted his tie with practiced ease. "We've been ready for this moment longer than we realized," she replied. "It's not an ending, Harry. It's a beginning." Her words carried the wisdom of someone who had already rebuilt her life once before, leaving behind a successful acting career to marry into the most famous family in the world. The couple had spent the previous evening going through boxes of mementos from their time as working royals. There were photographs from their tours of Australia and South Africa, thank you letters from charities they had supported, and programs from countless official engagements. Each item told a story of their attempts to modernize the monarchy while honoring its traditions. They had genuinely tried to make it work, but the institution and its surrounding ecosystem had proved resistant to change. Their decision to step back hadn't been made lightly. Months of discussions, negotiations, and sleepless nights had led to this point. The media attention had become suffocating, particularly the treatment of Meghan, which had echoes of what Harry's mother, Princess Diana, had endured. The racist undertones in some coverage, the constant invasion of privacy, and the lack of protection from the institution had made their position untenable. As they prepared to leave Kensington Palace, Harry thought about his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. Despite the public face of disappointment, he knew she understood their decision on a personal level. She had lived through her own family's sacrifices for duty and had watched her children navigate their own struggles with royal life. The Queen had always been someone who valued family above protocol, though she rarely had the luxury of choosing one over the other. The sound of gravel crunching under tires announced the arrival of their official car. Harry straightened his shoulders and took Meghan's hand. Today would be difficult. Seeing his father, Prince Charles, and brother Prince William under such circumstances would be emotionally charged. The brothers, once inseparable, had grown apart as their paths diverged. William, the future king, felt bound by duty and tradition, while Harry had chosen to prioritize his family's well-being and mental health. As they walked through the palace corridors one last time as working royals, their footsteps echoed off the historic walls. Staff members they had worked with for years offered respectful nods and warm smiles. These people had become like family, and leaving them behind was perhaps one of the hardest aspects of their decision. But Harry and Meghan had learned that sometimes love means letting go, even when it breaks your heart. The car door closed behind them with a soft thud, and they were driven through the streets of London toward Westminster Abbey. Outside the tinted windows, life continued normally. People went about their daily routines, unaware that inside this official vehicle, two people were preparing to say goodbye to the only life one of them had ever known, while the other prepared to leave behind her adopted country and the dream of serving it as she had hoped. Their hands remained clasped throughout the journey, a silent acknowledgement that whatever came next, they would face it together. The boy who had walked behind his mother's coffin had grown into a man who refused to let history repeat itself, and the woman beside him had proven she was willing to sacrifice everything for love and the chance to build something better for their son and future children. The abbey's spires came into view, and with them, the beginning of the end of their royal story. Westminster Abbey stood majestically against the gray London sky, its Gothic towers reaching toward heaven like stone prayers. As Harry and Meghan's car pulled up to the entrance, photographers' cameras began their familiar rapid-fire clicking, creating a soundtrack that had followed them throughout their royal journey. The Commonwealth Day service was one of the most important events in the royal calendar, bringing together representatives from 54 nations that had once been part of the British Empire. Inside the Abbey, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Members of the royal family had already taken their seats in the front rows, their positions carefully choreographed according to protocol that had been established over centuries. Queen Elizabeth II sat with her characteristic poise, her handbag perfectly positioned, and her expression giving nothing away. She had weathered many storms during her long reign, but the departure of her beloved grandson represented a new kind of challenge for the monarchy. Prince William and Catherine sat with their children, presenting the picture of royal stability that the institution desperately needed. William's jaw was set in a way that Harry recognized from their childhood. It was his brother's tell when he was struggling to contain strong emotions. The brothers had once shared everything: secrets, pranks, grief, and dreams. Now they could barely look at each other without the weight of unspoken words creating an invisible barrier between them. Prince Charles, heir to the throne, appeared older than his years as he watched his younger son prepare to walk away from everything the family represented. As a father, Charles understood Harry's desire to protect his family, but as the future king, he struggled with the precedent this departure would set. The monarchy had survived by adapting slowly and carefully, not by dramatic exits that captured global headlines. When Harry and Meghan entered the Abbey, a hush fell over the congregation. Meghan wore a vibrant green dress that seemed to glow against the ancient stone walls, while Harry was resplendent in his military uniform, his medals catching the filtered light streaming through the stained glass windows. They moved with practiced grace, acknowledging the various dignitaries and Commonwealth representatives who had come to pay their respects. The service itself was a beautiful celebration of the Commonwealth's diversity and shared values. Choirs sang hymns in different languages, representing the multicultural tapestry that Meghan had hoped to champion during her time as a working royal. As the music filled the Abbey's sacred space, she reflected on the opportunities she was leaving behind, the chance to be a voice for women's rights, racial equality, and mental health awareness on a global platform. During the readings, Harry's mind wandered to his military service and the wounded veterans he had supported through the Invictus Games. These were real people whose lives had been changed by his advocacy, and stepping back from royal duties meant leaving that platform behind. But he and Meghan had already begun planning their own foundation, determined to continue their charitable work outside the constraints of royal protocol. The moment that captured global attention came when the immediate royal family processed out of the Abbey. According to tradition, they walked in order of precedence, with the Queen leading, followed by Charles and Camilla, then William and Catherine. Harry and Meghan, no longer senior working royals, followed behind, symbolically and literally bringing up the rear. As they walked, Meghan's composure never wavered, but those who knew her well could see the slight tension in her shoulders. She had prepared for this moment, knowing that every gesture would be analyzed and every expression scrutinized. The woman who had once commanded television screens with her acting ability now gave the performance of her lifetime, projecting dignity and grace while her heart was breaking. Outside the Abbey, the family gathered for official photographs. The images would become historic, marking the last time Harry and Meghan would appear in official royal portraits. Conversations were polite but stilted, with family members maintaining appropriate distances. The Queen, ever the professional, ensured that the photographs were taken efficiently, understanding that prolonging the moment would only increase everyone's discomfort. Prince Philip, despite his advanced age, had insisted on attending the service. His presence added another layer of poignancy to the day, as he represented the kind of unwavering duty and sacrifice that had defined the monarchy for generations. He had given up his naval career to support his wife's reign, and he struggled to understand why Harry couldn't make similar sacrifices. As the family dispersed, small moments of humanity broke through the formal facade. Charles briefly touched Harry's arm, a gesture so quick that photographers almost missed it. The Queen, always precise with her words, simply said, "Take care of yourself." To Meghan, her tone carrying depths of meaning that protocol wouldn't allow her to express more openly. Catherine, who had once been welcomed into the family as an outsider herself, offered Meghan a small smile that acknowledged their shared experience of marrying into the Windsor dynasty. The two women had never been close friends, despite media attempts to create both rivalry and sisterhood narratives. But there was mutual respect for the challenges they each faced. The service concluded with the national anthem, and as voices rose in unison, Harry felt the weight of generations of royal duty pressing down on him. His great-great-grandmother Victoria had ruled an empire. His grandmother had guided the nation through its transformation into a modern democracy, and now he was choosing to write his own chapter outside these ancient walls. As they prepared to leave the Abbey for the final time as working royals, Meghan squeezed Harry's hand 3 times, their secret signal for "I love you" that they had developed during their courtship. Whatever storms lay ahead, they would weather them together, and that knowledge gave them the strength to walk out of Westminster Abbey with their heads held high, ready to face their future as private citizens with royal hearts. The reception following the Commonwealth Day service took place in the historic halls of Westminster, where centuries of British political and social history had unfolded. Ornate chandeliers cast warm light over the gathered dignitaries, Commonwealth representatives, and members of the royal family as they mingled over tea and delicate sandwiches. For Harry and Meghan, this represented their final opportunity to engage with the international community as official representatives of the Crown. High commissioners and prime ministers from across the Commonwealth approached the couple throughout the afternoon, many expressing genuine sadness at their departure. The Prime Minister of Canada, where Harry and Meghan had spent their Christmas holiday before announcing their decision, spoke quietly with them about maintaining connections despite their changing roles. These relationships have been carefully cultivated over months and years, and walking away from them felt like abandoning unfinished conversations. Meghan found herself in deep discussion with representatives from several African nations, countries she had hoped to visit in her role as a working royal. Her passion for education and women's empowerment had resonated strongly with these leaders, who saw in her a bridge between the old Commonwealth and a more diverse, inclusive future. As they spoke about ongoing projects and initiatives, the weight of missed opportunities hung heavy in the air. Meanwhile, Harry was surrounded by military officials and veterans advocates. His work with wounded servicemen and women have been one of the most fulfilling aspects of his royal role, and these relationships have been forged through shared understanding of military service and sacrifice. A decorated general from Australia quietly assured him that the bonds formed through the Invictus Games would transcend his changing royal status. But Harry knew that his official platform for this work was ending. The elephant in the room was the family's strained relationships, which played out in careful choreography throughout the reception. William and Harry, who had once been each other's closest confidants, maintained polite distance while still acknowledging each other when protocol demanded. Their wives, Catherine and Meghan, navigated the social landscape with practiced skill, ensuring that their personal feelings didn't overshadow the diplomatic importance of the event. Queen Elizabeth II moved through the reception with her trademark efficiency, spending appropriate amounts of time with each delegation while keeping a careful eye on her family's interactions. At 83, she had seen the monarchy weather many storms, but the departure of Harry and Meghan represented a new kind of challenge. The institution she had devoted her life to preserving would need to adapt to changing expectations about duty, family, and personal happiness. Prince Charles found himself fielding questions about the family's future from Commonwealth leaders who had grown fond of Harry and Meghan. His responses were diplomatically perfect, expressing support for his son's decision while reassuring everyone that the monarchy remained committed to its Commonwealth relationships. Privately, however, Charles wrestled with feelings of failure as both a father and an heir to the throne. As the afternoon wore on, informal conversations revealed the genuine affection that many Commonwealth representatives felt for Harry and Meghan. Their tours of Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa had left lasting impressions, and their modern approach to royal engagement had resonated with younger populations across the Commonwealth. Several officials quietly suggested that their departure might actually weaken the monarchy's connection to these crucial relationships. Meghan's conversation with the High Commissioner from South Africa was particularly poignant. During their tour of that country, she had connected deeply with young women fighting for education and equality. The commissioner spoke about programs that had been inspired by Meghan's visit, and how young girls had seen possibilities for themselves reflected in her story. Leaving this work behind felt like breaking promises to people who had trusted her with their hopes. The formal speeches during the reception celebrated the Commonwealth's unity and shared values, but beneath the ceremonial language lay real questions about the organization's future. Harry and Meghan had represented a more diverse, globalized vision of what the Commonwealth could become. Their departure left uncertainty about whether the royal family could maintain its relevance to the 54-member nations, particularly those with younger, more diverse populations. During a quiet moment, Harry found himself standing before a portrait of his mother, Princess Diana, that had been specially hung for the event. Diana's work with landmine clearance and HIV/AIDS awareness had shown him how royal platform could be used for meaningful change. A Commonwealth representative from one of the countries where Diana had worked approached him, sharing how her legacy continued to inspire their humanitarian efforts. The conversation reinforced Harry's belief that meaningful service could continue outside traditional royal structures. As the reception drew to a close, there were subtle moments of farewell that spoke louder than formal ceremonies. Staff members who had worked with Harry and Meghan for years offered quiet words of support and best wishes. These were people who had traveled with them, organized their engagements, and witnessed their genuine commitment to their roles. Their private farewells carried more weight than any public statement could convey. The Queen's private secretary discreetly informed the couple that Her Majesty wished to speak with them before they left. This unexpected request sent ripples of speculation through the remaining guests, but protocol demanded that such conversations remain confidential. The meeting, held in a small private room adjacent to the main reception, lasted only 10 minutes, but it would remain one of the most significant moments of their royal journey. When Harry and Meghan emerged from their private audience with the Queen, their expressions revealed nothing of what had been discussed. Royal training had taught them both to maintain perfect composure regardless of their emotions, and this skill served them well as they prepared for their final departure from an official royal engagement. The woman who had once been a television actress and the prince who had grown up in the public eye gave flawless performances of dignified farewell. As their car pulled away from Westminster, the couple sat in contemplative silence. The weight of what they were leaving behind was balanced by their excitement for what lay ahead. Behind them, the Commonwealth reception continued, but without their presence, something fundamental had shifted in the monarchy's relationship with its global family. The drive back to Frogmore Cottage took them through the heart of Windsor, past the castle where Harry had spent countless weekends as a child, and where his grandfather Prince Philip still maintained his daily routines. The familiar landmarks of his childhood seemed different now, viewed through the lens of departure rather than belonging. Ancient oak trees that had witnessed centuries of royal history stood sentinel along the route, their bare March branches reaching toward a sky heavy with unspoken possibilities. Frogmore Cottage had been their first real home together as a married couple, a place where they had stripped away the formality of royal life and created something authentically their own. The renovations had been criticized in the press for their cost, but walking through the rooms now, Harry felt only gratitude for having had a space where they could be simply husband and wife rather than Duke and Duchess. Baby Archie's nursery still contained toys and books, though much of their personal belongings had already been shipped to Canada in preparation for their new life. Meghan moved through the house with purpose, checking that everything was properly packed and organized. Her natural efficiency, honed through years of managing her acting career and later her royal responsibilities, served her well in orchestrating this major life transition. But there were moments when she paused at particular items. A photograph from their wedding day, a thank you card from a charity they had supported, a program from a performance they had attended together, and her composure would flicker slightly. The evening brought a succession of private farewells that proved more emotionally challenging than the formal ceremonies of the day. Members of their household staff, people who had become like family during their time as working royals, came to offer their personal goodbyes. These were individuals who had seen them at their most vulnerable moments, had traveled with them around the world, and had believed in their vision for modernizing royal engagement. Maria, Meghan's personal assistant, had been with her since before the wedding, helping her navigate the complex protocols of royal life while maintaining her authentic voice. Their farewell was particularly difficult, as Maria had become both confidant and friend during Meghan's most challenging period of adjustment. The young woman had fielded countless media requests, organized charitable initiatives, and provided steady support through the storm of public scrutiny that had surrounded the Duchess. Harry's private secretary, someone who had served the royal family for over 15 years, struggled to maintain professional composure as he presented final documents requiring the prince's signature. These papers formally transferred his patronages to other members of the royal family, ending his official connection to organizations he had supported for years. Each signature felt like cutting another thread that bound him to his former life. The most difficult conversation of the evening came when William arrived unexpectedly at Frogmore Cottage. The brothers had barely spoken since Harry and Meghan's announcement, and the gulf between them seemed to have widened during the day's formal events. But family bonds, however strained, demanded this private moment away from cameras and protocol officers. They walked through the cottage gardens in the gathering dusk, their conversation halting and careful. William, as the future king, felt deeply that Harry was abandoning not just his royal duties, but their shared legacy and the promise they had made as children to honor their mother's memory through service. Harry tried to explain that protecting his wife and son was itself a form of honoring Diana's memory, particularly given the parallels between Meghan's treatment in the media and their mother's experience. The brothers' disagreement wasn't just personal. It represented fundamentally different visions of what the monarchy could and should be. William believed in gradual change from within the institution, using his position to slowly modernize while respecting tradition. Harry had come to believe that the institution was incapable of the kind of change needed to remain relevant, and that genuine service could better be accomplished outside its constraints. Their conversation ended without resolution, but with mutual respect for the difficulty of each other's positions. When William left, both brothers knew that their relationship would need time and space to heal, if it ever could. The young men who had once presented a united front against the world were now heading in opposite directions, bound by love but divided by duty. As night fell over Frogmore, Harry and Meghan sat in their living room, surrounded by the remnants of their royal life. Photo albums documented their tours and engagements, while official documents and correspondence told the story of their attempt to carve out a sustainable role within the royal family. The weight of what they were leaving behind was balanced by their certainty that they were making the right choice for their family. Meghan reflected on her journey from Hollywood actress to British royal to private citizen, preparing for a new life in North America. The transformation had been more dramatic than any role she had ever played, and the stakes infinitely higher. But throughout the challenges, her core values had remained unchanged. The belief in using whatever platform she had to advocate for equality, justice, and human dignity. Harry thought about his mother's legacy and how it had shaped his understanding of royal duty. Diana had shown him that true service meant connecting with people's hearts, not just fulfilling ceremonial obligations. The charitable work he and Meghan planned to continue would honor that legacy while allowing them to operate outside the constraints that had ultimately proved incompatible with their values and their family's well-being. Their final evening at Frogmore was spent in quiet conversation about their hopes and concerns for the future. They discussed their son Archie's upbringing, their planned charitable foundation, and the challenge of maintaining their principles while building financial independence. The uncertainty was daunting, but they faced it with the same determination that had brought them through their courtship under intense media scrutiny and their challenging early years as working royals. As they prepared for bed, Harry took one last walk through the cottage gardens. The ancient trees of Windsor Great Park rustled in the evening breeze, carrying with them the whispers of centuries of royal history. Tomorrow would begin their new chapter, but tonight belonged to memories and the bittersweet recognition that some chapters must end for others to begin. Meghan joined him in the garden, and together they stood looking up at the stars, the same stars that had watched over the royal family for generations. Their story as working royals was ending, but their story as a family committed to service and positive change was just beginning. The final morning at Frogmore Cottage dawned crisp and clear, with spring sunlight streaming through the windows of what had been their sanctuary for the past 2 years. Harry woke early, as had become his habit during the stressful months leading to this decision, and found himself walking through the empty rooms where he and Meghan had tried to build a life that balanced royal duty with personal happiness. The cottage felt different now, with most of their belongings already shipped ahead to Canada, leaving behind only the essential items they would need for their last few days in the United Kingdom. Meghan was already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast with the same attention to detail she brought to everything in her life. Coffee brewed in the machine they had received as a wedding gift from a Commonwealth leader, while she carefully arranged fresh fruit and pastries on plates that bore the subtle royal cipher. These small domestic moments had become precious to them during their time as working royals, offering normalcy amid the constant scrutiny and protocol that governed their public lives. Baby Archie, now 10 months old and beginning to take his first tentative steps, moved between his parents with the easy confidence of a child surrounded by love. He was too young to understand the significance of this day, but his presence reminded them constantly of why they were making this choice. They wanted him to grow up with the freedom to choose his own path, rather than having his entire life predetermined by the circumstances of his birth. The morning brought a steady stream of final arrangements and farewells. Security personnel who had protected them through countless engagements came to hand over keys and access codes, their professional facades masking the genuine fondness they had developed for the couple. These men and women had witnessed Harry and Meghan's most vulnerable moments, had traveled with them to dangerous locations, and had become the closest thing to normal relationships they could maintain within the constraints of royal life. Their private secretary arrived with the final official documents requiring signatures, formally ending Harry's military appointments and patronages. Each signature was accompanied by a brief explanation of how these responsibilities would be redistributed among other members of the royal family. The Invictus Games Foundation, perhaps Harry's most meaningful contribution to royal service, would continue under his patronage since it was his personal creation, offering a bridge between his past and future roles. The emotional weight of the morning was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Prince Charles arrived alone, without the usual entourage of protection officers and private secretaries that normally accompanied senior royals. The informality of his visit spoke to the personal nature of this farewell between father and son, away from the protocols and pressures that had complicated their relationship throughout Harry's adult life. Charles and Harry walked together through the Frogmore Gardens, past the lake where Queen Victoria had once fed the ducks with Prince Albert, and under the ancient oak trees that had witnessed centuries of royal family drama. Their conversation was quiet and intense, touching on subjects that had remained unspoken during the formal negotiations of the past year. As a father, Charles expressed his fear that he was losing his son, while also acknowledging that he understood Harry's desire to protect his family from the same pressures that had destroyed Diana. The Prince of Wales had his own complicated relationship with duty and personal happiness, having waited decades to marry the woman he truly loved while fulfilling his obligations to the crown. His understanding of Harry's choice was deeper than public statements could convey, even as he regretted the loss of his son's service to the monarchy. Their farewell, when it came, was emotional and private, a moment between father and son that transcended their roles as future king and departing prince. Meghan spent her final morning in the cottage going through personal items that couldn't be shipped ahead, photographs, letters, and mementos from their time as working royals. Each item carried memories of their attempts to modernize the monarchy while honoring its traditions. A handwritten thank you note from a young girl they had met during a school visit, a program from their first joint engagement, a photograph from their tour of Africa. These fragments told the story of their brief but impactful time as senior royals. Her conversation with Catherine, who came to Frogmore for a private farewell, was complex and nuanced. The two women had never been close friends, despite media attempts to create both rivalry and sisterhood narratives between them. But they shared the unique experience of marrying into the Windsor family as outsiders, and Catherine understood some of the challenges Meghan had faced in adapting to royal life. Their goodbye was respectful and warm, with an understanding that their different approaches to royal duty reflected their different personalities and circumstances rather than any personal conflict. The final hours at Frogmore were spent in quiet family time, with Harry and Meghan determined that their last memories of their British home should be peaceful rather than stressful. They played with Archie in the garden, took photographs of the cottage that had been their haven, and spoke about their hopes for the future. The uncertainty ahead was daunting, but their commitment to each other and their shared values gave them strength. As their car pulled away from Frogmore Cottage for the final time, Harry looked back at the building that had housed their dreams of serving the Commonwealth while raising their family in relative privacy. The cottage would remain in the royal family, perhaps to house another minor royal in future generations. But for Harry and Meghan, it represented a chapter of their lives that was closing with a mixture of sadness and relief. The drive to the airport took them past Windsor Castle, where the Queen maintained her weekend residence, and where Harry had spent countless childhood weekends learning about duty, service, and the weight of crown and tradition. The ancient walls that had protected and confined generations of royals receded in their rearview mirror as they headed toward Heathrow Airport, and the commercial flight that would take them to their new life in Canada. Their departure from British soil was deliberately low-key, avoiding the media circus that had surrounded so many of their public appearances. As private citizens embarking on a new chapter, they wanted their exit to be dignified but not dramatic. The airplane that carried them away from Britain also carried their hopes for a future where they could serve others according to their own values and raise their son with the freedom to choose his own destiny. As the English countryside disappeared below the clouds, Harry and Meghan held hands and looked forward rather than back. Their story as working royals had ended, but their story as global advocates for positive change was just beginning. The boy who had walked behind his mother's coffin had grown into a man who refused to let duty destroy the people he loved most. And the actress who had found her prince had discovered that the greatest fairy tale is the one you write yourself.